Welcome to Policy on Demand's Week in Review. I'm Pat Brown. So Congress remains out this week for the August recess, but things are still happening here in Washington, D.C. President Trump announced a 90-day extension earlier this week of the deadline for the imposition of increased tariffs on China, presumably allowing more time to negotiate a bilateral trade deal between the United States and China. In addition, there were two important data points released by the government this week relating to inflation: the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, earlier this week, and more recently, the Producer Price Index, or PPI. So the big question, are tariffs leading to increased inflation? Well, is the glass half full or half empty? It's fair to say that politicians and pundits on both sides of this debate can point to things in this data to support their argument. The market seemed to react positively to the CPI data released earlier this week, less positively, frankly, to the PPI release. So we'll have to continue to watch this space and this debate over the impact of tariffs on inflation and the broader economy. Turning our attention away from Washington, we did see a significant development this week in Australia. That is a high court ruling from Australia relating to a ruling in a case involving PepsiCo. So in this case, the taxpayer sold beverage concentrate from a non-Australian seller to an Australian buyer. The Australian Tax Office, or ATO, argued that notwithstanding the form of the transaction actually involved the payment of an embedded royalty, and this royalty is subject to Australian withholding tax. So the Australian High Court held for the taxpayer. Essentially, the sale of concentrate is what it appears to be, and this is not a transaction that is subject to Australian withholding tax. So why is this case important? Well, fundamentally, it's another data point in what is really the defining issue of our time as tax professionals, and that is, when can jurisdictions impose tax on income that relates to valuable IP that is owned outside of the country but is utilized within the country? This, of course, is the issue that lies behind the debate over digital services taxes, or DSTs. This, of course, is what the OECD's Pillar 1 project was trying to get at. Indeed, maybe also you could argue that Pillar 2 relates to this fundamental issue of when is it appropriate for countries to exercise taxing jurisdiction over the returns to valuable intellectual property. One might even argue that some of the arguments around tariffs present these same sorts of issues. Now, the ATO, the Australian Tax Office, has been very forward-leaning on this issue, including by issuing a novel ruling about a year ago relating to the taxation of software. So this case has been decided, but it's fair to say the battle over these issues is going to continue to rage on. So before we wrap, turning back to Washington, we know that the U.S. Treasury Department is working on guidance to implement the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, including potentially imminent guidance that relates to an executive order that was signed by President Trump relating to what it means to begin construction on wind and solar facilities for purposes of determining whether they're eligible for the Inflation Reduction Act credits, which were modified in the One Big Beautiful Bill. Treasury also recently released guidance relating to the treatment of partnerships under the CAMT. This guidance is really part of Treasury's broader deregulatory agenda, which the Trump administration ushered in through a series of executive orders issued by President Trump shortly after he took office. So we should continue to look for further developments from Treasury, both with respect to OB3 regulations and this deregulatory agenda. So that's all we've got for now. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned.